Hindi na napapanahong batas ang maglalagay sa panganib sa mga lifeline na ito. The consequences at home are equally alarming, Mr. President. The Department of Finance estimates that our outdated secrecy regime results in billions of pesos in revenue losses annually due to untraceable tax evasion. The IMF, or International Monetary Fund, in its assessments to the Philippine financial sector, has repeatedly warned that our strict bank secrecy rules hamper effective supervision and may impair financial stability. Nakita na po natin, Ginoong Pangulo, kung paano ang mga yaman na nakuha sa iligal na paraan ay madali pong itago o naitatago sa likod ng sobrang higpit o ultra-strict na bank secrecy at confidentiality. At nakita na rin po natin kung paano naantala at minsan tuluyang nahihinto ang mga investigasyon dahil po sa mga batas na ang layunin po sana, Ginoong Pangulo, ay protektahan. Protektahan ang mga tapat at marangal na depositor na nagagamit din bilang kanlungan ng mga tiwaling opisyal, mga money launderer, mga nagpopondo ng iligal na droga, at mga mapagsamantalang mandaraya. Sa huli po, ang naagrabyado po rito ay hindi ang may kasalanan, kundi ang karaniwang manggagawa at pamilyang Pilipino na naniniwala sa patas at malinis na sistema. Mr. President, we cannot continue to allow secrecy to be weaponized against the Filipino people. This bill, Mr. President, the BRIGHT Act, proposes not wholesale disclosure, Mr. President, but measured transparency under very specific, legitimate circumstances. Deposits remain confidential as the general rule and may be examined only under conditions explicitly defined in the law. Among these legitimate purposes are investigations by the courts, inquiries by Congress, including impeachment proceedings, investigations conducted by the Office of the Ombudsman, supervisory examinations by the BSP, inquiries by AMLA, BIR, and specific financial regulators, lawful access for the settlement of estates of deceased depositors, and voluntary authorization by the depositor. Each request must follow clear procedures, subject to safeguards provided by the Act and consistent with the Data Privacy Act. With the passage of this measure, Mr. President, for the first time in 7 decades, the Filipino people will know when public officials live beyond their means. There is a way to find out, Mr. President. When billions of pesos disappear, they cannot hide behind secrecy. When corruption happens, investigations can move forward. When regulators need information to protect the economy, they can act, Mr. President. When crimes occur, they cannot be covered by confidentiality. Sinasabi po ng panukalang batas na ito sa sambayan ng Pilipino, wala pong exempted sa katapatan. Walang privilege sa katotohanan. Mr. President, we are mindful of the burden placed on banks and non-bank financial institutions. And kaya po sa BRIGHT Act, naglalagay po tayo ng provision for safe harbor for institutions that comply in good faith. At the same time, the bill imposes penalty on individuals who abuse their authority to access deposit information and those unjustifiably refuse to disclose information when required by law. For juridical entities, the responsible officers who directly participated in the violation will also be held liable, consistent with principles under AMLA and the revised Corporation Code. This ensures accountability, Mr. President, not only at the institutional level, but also at the personal level. Allow me to state categorically, Mr. President, when I was asked a while ago about addressing fears and misconceptions. This bill, Mr. President, does not grant unfettered access to anyone's bank account. This bill does not allow political fishing expeditions. This bill does not undermine the right to privacy. Legitimate privacy remains protected. What this bill removes is the blanket of secrecy that shields corruption and criminality. Mr. President, let this representation address our honest depositors, ang ating pong mga ordinaryong manggagawa, ang ating mga OFWs, ang ating mga small business owners, ang ating mga senior citizens at retirees with deposits. Your privacy remains protected. Your accounts remain confidential. Your rights remain intact. This bill protects you. It only exposes those who betray public trust. Mr. President, our failure to modernize our bank secrecy regime has long left us behind. We have fallen out of step with global expectations and regional standards, and we continue to tie the hands of the very institutions tasked with protecting the integrity of our financial system. Kaya natutuwa din po tayo, Ginoong Pangulo, na ito ay naging parte ng Legislative Development Council na maging priority measure ng ating administrasyon. The BRIGHT Act is not merely a compliance measure, Mr. President. It is a governance reform, an anti-corruption reform, and a national integrity reform. It is a step toward recovering stolen public funds, preventing money laundering, strengthening tax enforcement, empowering regulators, and building a trustworthy and resilient financial system. And so, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, transparency is not the enemy of progress. Secrecy is. The era when bank secrecy could be used to hide wrongdoing must come to an end. And with BRIGHT Act, the Philippines can finally join the rest of the world in upholding modern standards of financial integrity. Mr. President, the acronym of this bill is BRIGHT because that is exactly what we want for our country and our people. A brighter financial system, a brighter justice system, a brighter future where corruption has no place to hide. Our bank secrecy laws have served their purpose, but today they serve the wrong people. It is time to amend them. It is time to modernize them. It is time to put integrity at the very center of our banking system. And so, Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, this representation respectfully seek your support for the immediate passage of the BRIGHT Act, a long overdue reform essential to strengthening transparency and integrity in our financial system. Para sa bayan, para sa katapatan, para sa isang mas maliwanag na hinaharap. Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo, at pagpalain tayong lahat ng ating Panginoong Diyos.
Majority Leader. Senator Francis Pangilinan is recognized to co-sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader, distinguished colleagues. Unang-una sa lahat, nais kong batiin at i-congratulate ang ating kasamahan na si Senator Joel Villanueva sa pag-sponsor ng isang panukalang batas na long overdue. Gaya ng nabanggit niya, 1955 pa nung ito'y naging batas ang Secrecy of Bank Deposits Act. At ibang-iba na ang mundo sa ngayon. Nakatindig tayo ngayon, mga kasamahan natin sa Senado, para i-co-sponsor ang isang solusyon kontra korupsyon. Isang panukalang pahihirapan ang pagnanakaw sa kaban ng bayan at padadaliin ang paghuli sa mga magtatangka. Ang Banking Reform for Integrity, Good Governance, Honesty, and Transparency o BRIGHT Act. Mas madali na po mahuhuli ang mga salarin dahil pag naipasa ang batas na ito, mas madaling follow the money. Nilalayo ng panukalang ito na palawakin ang saklaw ng pagsisiwalat sa mga bank at financial deposits. Gusto rin nitong ipawalang bisa ang mga lumang probisyon ng Bank Secrecy Law. Sa loob ng 70 taon, halos ganap ang bank secrecy sa ating bansa. Makabuluhan ito noong isinabatas noong 1955. Ang layunin noon ay kumbinsihin ang mga kababayan natin na magtiwala sa mga bangko, na huwag mag-impok sa kanilang mga aparador, baul o lata o di kaya sa kawayan o kaya sa ilalim ng kama. May katuturan ito noon, hindi pa laganap ang pandaigdigang industriya ng money laundering at offshore loot. Pero wala na itong ibig sabihin ngayon. Sabi nga ng mga eksperto, naging pananggalang ang batas para tulungan ang katiwalian, ang tax evasion at iba pang mga krimen na may kinalaman sa pananalapi. Ngunit, kalakip dapat sa pagpasa natin sa panukalang batas na ito ang masusing lifestyle check upang mas madaling makikita o masusundan ang pera na maaring mahantong sa pagpapaliwanag din ng unexplained wealth. Kinakailangan ding paigtingin ang investigasyon at ang agarang pagsasampa ng mga kaso kasabay ng mga reformang magwawakas sa hindi katanggap-tanggap na kalagayan ng mga nakabingbing mga kaso na inaabot hindi lamang ng mga maraming taon, hindi lamang ng dekada, kung hindi ng maraming dekada. Hanggat nananatiling mabagal at hindi tiyak ang hustisya, nawawalan ng bisa ang deterrent effect ng batas at patuloy na lumalakas ang loob ng mga lumalabag dito. Mabuting pag-aralan kung may sasama ang mga nakatagong ari-arian katulad ng shell companies, ang ikangay paglalaban ng pera sa kasino at kahit na sa crypto, hindi pa rin magbabayad ang mesala. Dahil sa maraming anomalya sa gobyerno, sinasagot natin ang mga tanong ng mga legal na kasangkapan para ika nga ay, nabanggit ko kanina, masundan ang pera. Follow the money. Masundan at mabawi. Tulad ng mga pinakamalilinis na bansa sa mundo sa usapin ng katiwalian, Denmark, New Zealand, at ang kapitbansa nating Singapore, lahat sila pinapayagan ang mga regulator at mga otoridad sa buwis na bulatlatin ang mga nakatagong lihim sa mga bangko kapag hinihingi ng public interest. Mga kasama, hinihingi ko ang inyong suporta para sa Bright Act, isang napakatagal ng hinihinging upgrade, ika nga, ng isang kritikal na bahagi ng ating depensa kontra korupsyon, kontra tax evasion. Maraming salamat at we urge our colleagues to for swift passage, support for swift passage of this measure.
Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, my distinguished colleague, Senator Kiko Pangilinan. Mr. President, to allow our colleagues to study this measure further, I move to suspend consideration of the measure.
On the objection, hearing none, consideration of the measure suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may we recognize our distinguished colleague, Senator from Tarlac in Pampanga, no other than Senator Rodante Marcoleta, to avail of the privileged hour.
Senator Dante Marcoleta is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today to raise a constitutional alarm. We are witnessing an unusual situation in our bureaucracy today. At a time when local unrest and tumultuous global headwinds threaten the well-being of our kababayans, a growing number of crucial government agencies are being led not by duly confirmed cabinet secretaries, but by officials merely serving in an acting capacity. And this brings us to a disturbing reality in our bureaucracy today. Mr. President, what is at stake is not merely the reputation of individuals, but the integrity of our public institutions. As we speak, several key government agencies are being run by acting secretaries, officials who wield immense power, control billion-peso budgets, and approve critical infrastructure projects, yet have not undergone confirmation. These agencies include 1, Office of the Executive Secretary, Department of Finance, Department of Public Works and Highways, number 4, Department of Justice, number 5, Department of Budget and Management, 6, Department of Environment and Natural Resources, 7, Department of Transportation, and the last, the Presidential Communications Office. Hindi ito mga maliliit o mga basta-bastang ahensya, Mr. President. These are core institutions of our government. They control our money. They enforce our laws. They build our infrastructure. They defend sovereignty. They speak for the President and the Republic. They are alter egos of the President. Nevertheless, they are run by officials whose appointments or nominations have never been submitted to the Commission on Appointments for confirmation. Why does this matter, Mr. President? Because the Constitution did not leave this to discretion. Section 16, Article 7 of the 1987 Constitution provides, and I quote, "The President shall nominate and with the consent of the Commission on Appointments appoint the heads of the executive departments, ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls or officers of the armed forces from rank of colonel or naval captain, and other officers whose appointments are vested in him in this Constitution." The Constitution is very clear, Mr. President. It compels the President to nominate or appoint heads of executive departments, among others, and submit their appointments to the CA. The word "shall" makes it mandatory, not optional, restrictive, not permissive. Yet this constitutional command is being defied. Let me be precise, Mr. President. There is nothing inherently illegal about an acting secretary. The law allows it. The continuity of the government demands it, but what is dangerous is when acting becomes permanent by design. Our acting secretaries have been running major cabinet departments for months on end. Some for 2 or 4 months now, and one for over half a year. And up to this day, Mr. President, none of their appointment letters have been transmitted to the CA. Needless to say, the delay is not on the part of the CA. We cannot confirm what is never submitted. If Malacanang does not transmit the appointments, the Constitutional Commission is made powerless. Under the rules of the Civil Service Commission, enacting capacity entails not only the exercise of the ministerial functions attached to the position, but also the exercise of discretion, since the person designated is deemed to be incumbent of the position. They can issue policies, approve projects, sign contracts, and approve expenditure of public funds. They wield all the authority of permanent secretaries, while evading constitutional scrutiny and consent. Mr. President, the Constitution envisions a system of checks and balances, not convenience and circumvention. The Commission on Appointments was precisely restored under the 1987 Constitution to prevent the danger of allowing key positions to be filled without scrutiny, accountability, or constitutional restraint. We need to ensure that those entrusted with immense power are fit, competent, and worthy of public trust. Thus, the rigorous deliberations conducted by the Commission, and when the executive repeatedly relies on acting appointments, it weakens that constitutional safeguard and sends the wrong signal to the bureaucracy. Why the key cabinet members allowed to exercise full powers of their offices while never being presented before the CA for scrutiny? There can be many reasons, Mr. President. But one fact cannot be denied. This allows the executive to effectively create de facto permanent secretaries. This turns temporary designations into a tool of permanent power. Unfortunately, this kind of circumvention is nothing new. This representation has also previously noted and brought into attention the non-confirmation of the chairperson and board members of the Basis Convention Development Authority, or BCDA, which is a direct defiance of Republic Act number 7227, or the law that created the BCDA. This, alongside the continuing non-submission of appointments or nominations of officials, serving in acting capacity to the CA clearly undermines the constitutional mandate imposed upon by the Constitution. If the President has confidence in these officials, their appointments should have been sent to the CA promptly. Let us not allow the Republic to be ruled by officials who hold power without constitutional legitimacy, Mr. President. Because when appointments are withheld, the constitutional safeguard is effectively destroyed. Make no mistake, this call fully respects the separation of powers. But even more than that, Mr. President, this affirms our constitutional duty to check and balance power so that no branch, no office, and no official stands above the law. Let us remember, when leadership is temporary, responsibility becomes temporary. And when responsibility is temporary, corruption finds room to grow. We must not allow that, Mr. President. The people deserve more than paperwork. The people deserve more than excuses. The people deserve leadership that is permanent, accountable, and answerable. Sa huli, malinaw ang panawagan ng sambayanang Pilipino. Hindi sapat ang pansamantalang pamumuno sa mga ensyang may hawak ng buhay, kabuhayan at kaligtasan ng ating mga mamamayan. Ang pananagutan ay hindi maaaring acting lamang. Dapat ito'y ganap, malinaw at matatag. Sapagkat sa likod ng bawat pansamantalang desisyon at iniiwasang pananagutan, naroroon ang sambayanang patuloy na nagdurusa at tumihiling ng buong pananagutan mula sa kanilang pamahalaan. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Parang maganda yan. Thank you very much, Mr. President. We'd like to congratulate Senator Rodante Marcoleta for very good points being made. Tama po yan, Mr. President. Yung under our rules in the Commission on Appointments, when a secretary appointee has been bypassed 3 times, then the Commission on Appointments must decide whether to accept him or reject him.
On the third time.
On the 3rd time. However, maganda pong punto pinalabas po ni Senator Marcoleta, sila po in acting capacity. Wala po silang ad interim appointment coming from Malacanang. Therefore,
Yes.
there's nothing to act on.
Well,
And therefore,
let's place that on record so that the public is watching. When a presidential appointee is appointed into a cabinet position, when Congress is not in session, it is called an interim appointment.
yes.
When a cabinet position or person is appointed into the cabinet, when Congress is in session, it is only in an acting capacity.
Yes.
So it is correct, the point being raised by Senator Marcoleta. And I distinctly remember for a number of years, I would like to check how many years it was that Secretary Raul Gonzalez was Secretary of Justice for forever, but never submitted to the Commission on Appointments.
Yes,
Huh?
Mr. President.
Always ad interim.
And I think the crafters of the Constitution try to be sure about the checks and balances of government by having the person or these appointees go through the Commission on Appointments, Mr. President, to look at their background, to look at their fitness for the position. So,
Are there
I
any
commend.
interpellations,
maybe I recognize Senator
Senator, the President Pro Temp, Senator Ping Lacson is recognized.
friendly lang yun.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the distinguished gentleman from Pampanga and Tarlac will yield to maybe 1 or 2 questions.
Yes, Mr. President.
First, I'd like to associate myself because this has been lingering for quite some time. And there's so many session breaks that I remember Secretary Dizon has been acting secretary. And during a lunch meeting with Secretary Recto,
They become very
acting Secretary Recto, acting Executive Secretary, I even reminded him, sabi ko sa kanya, Ralph, mag-re-resume na yung session namin. Kailangan humingi na kayo ng ad interim appointment para ma-take up kayo ng Commission on Appointments. Pag inabot kayo ng session, resumption ng session, you will just be nominated and you cannot perform unless confirmed. So my question, Mr. President, is, in terms of authority and mandate, ano po ba ang difference ng full-time secretary and an acting secretary?
Mr. President, pareho lang po yung kanilang gawain, pareho lang ang kanilang pananagutan, ngunit ang pinag-uusapan po yung pagiging opisyal sana, hindi magiging temporary, hindi acting sana, para sa ganon ang kanilang gawain po sana ay palaging nakasalig po sa kagustuhan ng ating saligang batas. Kaya po nangangamba po ang representasyon na ito kung puro acting po, lalabas po silang overacting lahat pagdating ng araw, Mr. President.
In other words, a full-time secretary can perform some long-term policy planning and direction, while an acting secretary, since temporary, short-term lang yung kanyang policy. Yes, Mr.
May I
President.
interject? As far as I recall, an acting secretary may not appoint anyone in his cabinet. That's the way I recall it, and I don't think he is allowed to sign for a certain amount of budget or funds. That's why an ad interim appointment is important. That's how I recall it. I can stand corrected later on.
I think that is correct, Your Honor, Mr. President. There is some kind of limitation when a secretary has been appointed in an acting capacity. There are several conditions that attach to it, and sometimes he cannot perform some of the things that are within his jurisdiction.
That's why, Mr. President, I'm wondering why Malacanang has not issued ad interim appointments, because as mentioned by the distinguished gentleman from Tarlac, marami to, DOTR, DPWH, Executive Secretary, Department of Environment and Natural Resources, Department of Budget and, no, acting lang talaga si, parang OIC lang si Yosek Toledo because career. Secretary of Finance, at least 7, PCO, at least 7 cabinet secretaries are in acting capacity. So I wonder why Malacanang, in spite of, I've reminded even Acting Secretary Bida during the last Blue Ribbon hearing. I approached him, you better remind Secretary Recto about our conversation that you should be given ad interim appointments because we'll be resuming session on Monday. I remember telling him that. And he said, yes, that's the reason why I'm leaving because I'm having a meeting with the acting executive secretary. But even then, wala rin po nangyari kasi nag-resume na tayo last Monday and no ad interim appointments were signed by the presidents. I wonder why this is the case, Mr. President. Do you have would like to venture a guess or you have an information?
Your guess is as good as mine, Mr. President. The
Anyway-
graver problem is the CA cannot even act on its constitutional duty because they cannot be confirmed even if the President would like it to be so because the CA cannot confirm a secretary who is in an acting capacity. CA can only confirm secretaries who are designated with an ad interim capacity. So we will be facing a dilemma, Mr. President, that whether Malacanang would submit their names, but these are all in acting capacity, I don't think the CA can act on them because they are not in ad
Being
interim
submitted,
capacity,
yes.
Mr. President.
Based on a Supreme Court decision, a cabinet official who is in an acting capacity may only serve for 1 year. There is a Supreme Court decision to that effect. And then what would happen would be circumvention if they are appointed again in an acting capacity and avoiding the Commission on Appointments. Now, may we know how many? I hate interpolating from the chair, no? But in as much as you are discussing it already, maybe know how many cabinet officials are now in an acting capacity?
As I mentioned, Mr. President, at least 8.
What about the DENR?
Also, the DNR is included, Mr. President. I guess he will be the victim of the three-strike policy that the CA has
Because he was
already...
bypassed twice.
Nakadalawa na kasi, Mr. President.
Yes, so he was bypassed twice. The second bypass was in December. All right? Now, was he appointed after
No.
that?
He should have been appointed in ad interim capacity.
So what is
Before,
there is no secretary of the DENR right now. Is that correct? Senator Tulfo, with the permission of Senator Lacson and Senator Margoleta.
Yes, Mr. President, di po ba na dumana sa CA sila Secretary Lutilla, Secretary Ralph Recto? Pero, so kailangan pang bumalik ulit sila sa CA dahil
Yes,
ibang agency
they
na.
were not approved, yet they were not rejected. They were merely bypassed. Therefore, they may be appointed again. I don't know if he was appointed. If he was appointed after December, then
what is
it's an
the
interim appointment.
What are the rules, Mr. President? So
Mr.
we have to clarify this.
Yeah, Mr. President, I think to clarify the point made by the good gentleman from Palawan in the Philippines is that they had already gone to the CA, but that was for their previous appointments. As I believe Secretary Lutilla was for Department of Energy, and Secretary
Ralph Recto.
Ralph Recto, yes, already got confirmed as finance, but not yet as executive secretary. Secretary Vince Dizon was approved in DOTR, but not as the PWH secretary. So that's the confusion. But if you are appointed to a new position, you have to come back. Precedents, I've
Yes.
seen it many times. They have to
Correct.
come back. Yeah.
Correct. But in the case of Secretary Lotilla, if he was not appointed after December, he is not the Secretary of the DENR. And if he was, then ad interim appointment siya because we were on break.
Mr. President, must we inform the executive department regarding this matter? Baka sobrang dami pong ginagawa or busy, we have to inform them at least.
Well, the Senate is invited tomorrow because of the EDCOM presentation, which is a very historical thing. But I am told that there is a LEDAC meeting on Tuesday. Tuesday? Ah, hindi pa. February 10, matagal pa yun. So we will try to bring it up tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. President.